Brian Preston, the money guy.
So here's the guidance on buying a house. I recognize we at first want to make sure you have some type of cash reserves. Now, this is a little bit of a tap dance because I know I want you to have more than the $1,000. That we've hear that the average American, it's a baby step in the fact that you need to have 1,000. But I know you're probably when you're starting out, you're not going to have 3 to 6 months of cash reserves either. So you need to be somewhere between the 1,000 and 3 to 6 months. So make sure you're prioritizing cash reserves. And I understand that if you're under 30 years of age, when you buy your first house, we all know the rule of thumb on buying a house is 20%. I would be a hypocrite if I told you I put down 20% on my first house because I didn't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, did you put down 20% on your first house?
20% on my first either.
I think it is a hard, especially if you live in a high cost of living area. All my people out in the Northeast and California are laughing that I say Nashville is a high cost of living area, but it is relative to other parts
of the country,
especially in the South. But and it's one of those things where you need to understand what you can afford, and it's just unrealistic that you're going to be able to put down 20%.
That's right.
So if you're under 30, I think that you have to base it off of, okay, well, if I can't put down 20%, what's the guidelines for how much house I can afford? Well, that's when you have to base it off of what is the cash flow impact? How is this going to help you? It all comes back to how are you able to let that army of dollar bills build for you? Right. So we got some guidelines for you. If you're a person buying your first house, we want, and you don't think you're going to get big pay raises. Maybe you're just getting cost of living pay raises 3 to 5% per year. You don't want your housing expenses to exceed 25% of your gross income. That's all in. That's taxes. That's insurance. That's utilities. Right. I want you, because I don't want you to be house rich, life poor. So that's why I have you at that 25% lifestyle cost, because that's still going to leave you enough flex and capacity in your finances to where you can still fund other financial goals.
And then, just like with most things, if you're willing to do a little bit of research on the front end, you are buying your first house, go look at what your options are. Maybe you do qualify for an FHA type loan. Maybe the lender that you're working with will do something where even though you're not putting down 20%, you don't have to pay PMI. There are some ways to get around that. Don't just take the first offer. Go do some research and be an advocate for yourself, and you'll be amazed at what potential options are out there for you.
I do want to give, because a lot of you, because if you're watching a financial podcast or watching us on YouTube, listening to a podcast, watching us on YouTube, you're probably already way ahead of the curve, but that doesn't mean even 20-something Brian was ahead of the curve. I just didn't have the money coming in that reflected where I was going to be. So I want to give it a little bit of flexibility. If you are in a job, maybe you're a young attorney, a young doctor who's working on getting the cash flow caught up on the student loans and everything, I understand that your income is going up much faster than cost of living. It's going up faster than 3 to 5%. If your income is increasing 10, 15% at least a year, I think it's okay if the house, and I'm going out on a ledge saying this, if the house cost goes from 25% of your income to 30%.
Okay.
Because I just think that you have to almost do an income average of where you're going to be to get the house, so that way you don't buy a house that you outgrow need of too soon. Do you know what I mean by that?
You throw the ball where the receivers go and not where the receiver's at.
That's a good way to put it if you go use some sport analogy. That's pretty good. So let's turn the page and kind of switch gears, and let's talk about somebody who does have the army of dollar bills that they've starting to catch some momentum, meaning you hit that critical mass where you're doing the annual net worth statement, and you're noticing this cool thing every year when you do your net worth statement. You're noticing when you compare your income that you made with your hands, back, and brain, and you compare that to what your army of dollar bills created just by appreciation, you're like, wow, this is a pretty cool thing. Yeah.